Hello everyone, my name is Emily Hull. Welcome back to our self-defense video series brought to you by the Emily Taylor Center and Premier Martial Arts. Today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different than what we've been doing the past few weeks. The past few weeks we've been mainly focusing on physical self-defense and how do we deal with a physical threat. But for today, I really wanted to focus on the other side that we don't talk about nearly as much. This is a topic personal to my heart. I've gone through this struggle with friends before, and so I really wanted to spotlight it today just for individuals who may be going through this type of situation. With that, I do want to let you know today we are going to be talking about emotional and psychological abuse, if that's something that you're sensitive to, then you might think about skipping this one or just treading lightly, making sure that nothing here is going to have an adverse effect on you. So just a quick warning with that. So for the agenda today, I first want to talk about what emotional and psychological abuse are, what the difference is between the two. Then we'll talk a little bit about the differences in society's response to physical assault versus emotional abuse, because as you can probably imagine, there are some main differences there. And then last, I want to go over some resources for victims and survivors. So let's start with what are emotional and psychological abuse. So emotional abuse affects how someone feels. Here you can see some examples. It's just these little things. A lot of times they're very subtle because the abuser potentially doesn't want you to be able to notice them, but it still has an effect on you. If they're constantly criticizing, if they're trying to isolate you from isolating from friends and family, going through your phone, tracking you with GPS, all of those things are abusive. They are a bad situation, and that is what constitutes that level of emotional abuse. Psychological abuse has a little bit more nuance to it because it's involving trauma that's used to control, terrorize, and denigrate victims. So if you're gaslighting, if they're guilt tripping, if they're manipulating how you see them, making you think that you're going crazy by telling you that things didn't happen when you even have proof that they did. All of these things are deeper than emotional abuse and onto the level of psychological trauma. So now that we've gone over that, I want to talk about society's typical responses. So if you I follow a police scanner, the Lawrence Police Scanner on Facebook, and you see there's the domestic calls, right? You have the domestic violence, the shouting and yelling and things like that, and you're afraid somebody's being hit. Normally, when you learn that a friend is being abused physically, you call the police, you stop that situation, you step in between. Society's response to emotional abuse is very different in that fact, because a lot of times with emotional abuse, we are taught to think, oh, it's the victim's fault for this. They're being too sensitive. They're weak. They don't have a spine. They misunderstood the joke. I didn't mean what I said when I was angry. You know, all of these things, we hear these things normally in our lives, and it's not taught to us that that's not okay. Like it takes a long time, and that's why it can be hard for victims of emotional abuse to realize the situation that they're in and to be able to empower themselves in that situation and then leave that situation. So a lot of times people think that emotional abuse isn't as serious because there's no way to prove that it's actually happening and that it's hurting the victim. All we have are their experiences and their accounts to go off of. So a lot of times it's thought to not be as serious. But as we can see here, you know, this psychological abuse, this emotional abuse, this is real and this is painful a lot of times. So that's why we're working, and I felt like it was important to spotlight this today, because like I said, I have gone through situations like this with people very close to me, and the typical response was not good enough. So we're currently working to change that. Another reason why I wanted to spotlight this was it was pointed out to me by a social welfare professor at KU that when I asked her for advice on where to, like, if there was anything I should include in this video series, she said psychological abuse, because this is the type of abuse that more men will face. So a lot of times when we talk about self-defense, you've heard me say it before, we're focusing on a female defending from a male. It's rarely ever the other way around. And I'm not saying that it's not, because in occasions it can be, but usually it is female defending against male. This emotional and psychological abuse is more of what men have to deal with in these abusive relationships. So whereas we see self-defense, like physical self-defense, focusing on women, this kind of stuff is more directed towards men in abusive relationships. Men usually get more physical, and women usually go for the psychological in abusive situations. So that's another reason why I wanted to point that out. And that's also why this typical response happens, is because men are, you've heard all of this about toxic masculinity. Men aren't supposed to have squishy feelings, right? So it's very easy to pin that on him and say, oh, it's your fault, you're being too sensitive, you should take care of her more, or grow a spine and stand up to her, or something like that. But in all reality, it's not that simple. So recognizing abuse is one of the most important pieces of this video, I think, because since we're trained to kind of side with the abuser and take their excuses, it can sometimes be really hard to recognize that abuse is actually happening, and it can be really hard for people in those situations to see it how it is and then empower themselves and potentially leave the situation. So I found this website here. It has, I believe this is the one with like 64 different signs of mental abuse. And it also has a really good synopsis at the end on what to do and who to talk to if you recognize these behaviors in your relationship or a friend's relationship, and who to call, who to talk to. Here I've included some examples of the signs that they put on the website in case you don't have a chance to go to it. But this is really, really important for those who are maybe kind of questioning if something in your intuition feels off, that I would definitely take a look at this website to kind of see how many you can check off and really analyze deeper on if this is going to be something that you need to watch and worry about. So I also found a great website, an article from Verywell Mind that was advice on dealing with emotional abuse. So these were 7 of their steps and bullet points on how to cope with emotional abuse. So the first one is make yourself a priority. You have to make sure that you're taking the best care of yourself as possible, because it's not your fault that you're enduring this abuse. That's one of the common tactics of an abuser in an emotional abuse situation, is making you feel like it's your fault. And by making yourself a priority, you're proving that it isn't your fault, and you're reinforcing that idea in your mind, and that's super important. The second is establishing boundaries. So you don't want to establish boundaries that you aren't comfortable with standing up with, but establishing boundaries: no, you cannot yell at me. No, you cannot look at my phone. No, you cannot do this. If you are comfortable with making those and following through, and you don't believe that that will put you in physical danger, then that's a really good place to start. Number 3, stop blaming yourself. It's absolutely not your fault. And there's no reason why anyone should ever be emotionally abused. So it's absolutely not your fault, even if they might make you feel like it is. 4 is realizing that you can't fix them. The people that I went through with this, that was their goal. Well, they're changing. I promise they're changing. And time after time, they were not. And it is frankly heartbreaking to see a little bit someone that you are close to going through this. But sometimes it's better to put you over the relationship and go ahead and move on. And as hard as that is to hear, as hard as that may seem, we're going to talk here a little bit about where you can go and who to help you. So 5 is avoid engaging. So this means if they start to yell, if they start to instigate, if they try to goad you into an argument, avoid engaging. Remove yourself from the situation. Don't give them what they want if you feel that you can do so safely. Building a support network is huge. I was a part of the support network for my friends that were going through this. Their families were in on it. Just having those people to sit down and hold you and talk to you and make sure that you're doing okay, to check up and make sure nothing has gone wrong. Because sometimes, this emotional abuse usually stays in its own piece, and then it can move into more physical pieces as well. So you want to make sure that you have a support network to make sure that you have someone to reach out to in the case that something goes downhill. And then the last one is work on an exit plan. For some people, this might not be an option. It may be so ensnared and entangled that an exit plan isn't immediately plausible. And that's okay. One of the hardest things that I had to swallow when my friends were going through this was when we called the domestic violence shelter. They said, you cannot make this person leave. You can't make them leave. And that was one of the hardest things that I had to get through, but helping her work on that exit plan and how were we going to leave and how do we make sure he can't find us and things like that. It really did help, and it helped her see the possibility of moving on and what's beyond this. So that can seem scary at sometimes, leaving. It's unknown after any breakup, it's being alone again. And that's why that support network is good. But it's also good to have people who have fought this fight before be on your side. So there is help for you. If it seems really, really difficult to come up with that exit plan and you're not sure how to stay safe, with our concern, he had apps on her phone and he had tracking on all of her devices. So we had to figure out how to get around that. And, we're teenagers. We didn't know how to do that. So that's when we called the Willow Domestic Violence Center, and they were able to help us through that. So I wanted to provide some numbers here, some websites, chat lines, things like that you can reach out to if you are in trouble. This also works if your friend or family member is scared to reach out because they aren't sure how their abuser will react if they find out. So these also work with other people as well. I called the domestic violence center for my friends, and we were able to work out a plan kind of with me as the middleman between my friend and the center to make the best plan possible. So we have the domestic violence hotline here. They have a number here, or you can also chat online. A lot of these websites, if you're chatting, they're private, they're confidential, and they also have an out button. So if you're worried about your abuser finding out, there are tech tips on how to keep them from finding out. And there are also buttons on many of the websites that when you click them, they will either return you to a blank tab or something like the National Weather Service, something that's inconspicuous and doesn't seem like anything is relating to abuse. So there's the National Domestic Violence Hotline, National Relationship Abuse Hotline, National Sexual Assault Hotline, toll-free phone numbers you can see here, and that's just to talk to a professional who has seen likely something like your case before or your friend's case before, and it's really, really nice to have that reassurance of expertise on your side. The Willow Domestic Violence Center works in the Lawrence area. I believe they go out a little bit beyond Lawrence, but they have a hotline 24/7. That's what we called, that you can see there. And then they also have private messaging online. They provide confidential support and advice for people in abusive relationships. And they also offer safe places from abuse for those who have chosen to leave. Thankfully, my friend and I didn't have to choose that option because she was able to find other arrangements. But if that's something that you believe that you will need, then reach out to them and they will find a way to help you. And then this last one here is stoprelationshipabuse.org. And this is a fantastic website for resources going about COVID-19. If you're in an LGBTQ relationship, what abuse can look like there. If you are worrying about what kind of abuse you're facing, if it's even abuse, dealing with all of these things, can be overwhelming and stressful. I've been there. And having this website, even a year later, has helped me feel calmer about the situation were it ever to rise again. So look through these websites. If you have any questions, my email is open, em.hull@ku.edu. If you ever need to talk, I am here. I will be an ally with you and I can get you into contact with who you need. So I hope this video has helped you learn about a little bit about emotional and psychological abuse, how to see it in your relationships. I feel like it's a very important part of self-defense to know this sort of thing because you want to be out of that situation before it gets physical, right? That's our de-escalation. That's our preemption of the situation. So if we can get out while we can, then that's the best opportunity. So in times of emotional abuse and psychological abuse, just stay strong, build that network, and make sure that you've got people in your corner who are willing to go to bat for you. And these numbers here, these chats here, are the first step to moving towards that. So thank you all for watching today. I believe we're going to be wrapping it up in the next couple weeks, unless someone has last minute suggestions for content, but I'm looking forward to a couple weeks off before school starting again in the fall. So thank you all for joining us. Share this. We never know who it may help someday. So thank you for watching. See you next time.